Welcome to icaact Radio, your civilian citizens dedicated to exposing domestic and international terrorism. Hello and welcome back, icaact Radio listeners, to the United We Strike Marathon Weekend Preaching Don't Buy, Don't Comply, Ask Why. Today is May 9th of 2015. Along with us today, as special co-host is Dr. Edward Spencer. Today we'll be speaking about emails that show that the American Psychological Association secretly worked with the Bush administration to enable torture. Now, what's important about this is in our last 3 episodes, we spoke about the torture and the pharmacological waterboarding and the use of the mental health professionals in the implementation of torture in Guantanamo. And the following subsequent radio show, we showed how there was a direct link to law enforcement officers here in the United States, specifically in the Chicago area. And it was a secret black site where American citizens are being taken to and held without representation. In other words, no access to an attorney and sometimes disappearing for days. And some of the victims who have come out of that facility have claimed not only physical and mental abuse, but actually sexual abuse that was being implemented to interrogate them. Some of these detainees in this black site here in the United States were exercising their right to free speech. In other words, protesting against things that they felt should not be happening here in the United States. And in our last show, we had Dr. John Hall, the author of 2 books. The first one, A New Breed: Satellite Terrorism in America, and the second release, which outlines the type of non-consensual experimentation that is happening not only here in the United States but abroad throughout the world, and that book is called Guinea Pigs: Technologies of Control. Today's special guest, my co-host, is Dr. Edward Spencer. And Dr. Edward Spencer, what I would like to do is talk about this story that's breaking out about this report that's coming out of Democracy Now! And that was with Amy Goodman and Juan Gonzalez, and they did an excellent job in interviewing a couple of members of the American Psychological Association who appeared to be dissidents because they were trying to separate themselves away from the story. And it looks like, according to Democracy Now!, that details have emerged on how the American Psychological Association, the world's largest group of psychologists, aided government-sanctioned torture under President George W. Bush. And a group of dissident psychologists have just published a 60-page report alleging that the APA secretly coordinated with officials from the CIA, the White House, and the Pentagon to change the APA ethics policy to align it with the operational needs of the CIA's torture program. Here's a soundbite from Amy Goodman from Democracy Now!
New details have emerged on how the American Psychological Association, the world's largest group of psychologists, aided government-sanctioned torture under President George W. Bush. A group of dissident psychologists have just published a 60-page report alleging the APA secretly coordinated with officials from the CIA, White House, and the Pentagon to change the APA ethics policy to align it with the operational needs of the CIA's torture program. The report also reveals a behavioral science researcher working for President Bush secretly drafted language that the APA inserted into its ethics policy on interrogations. Much of the report is based on hundreds of newly released internal APA emails from 2003 to 2006 that show top officials were in direct communication with the CIA. In 2004, for example, the APA secretly took part in a meeting with officials from the CIA and other intelligence agencies to discuss ethics and national security. In one email, the APA stated that the aim of the meeting was, quote, to take a forward-looking, positive approach in which we convey a sensitivity to and appreciation of the important work mental health professionals are doing in the national security arena, and in a supportive way offer our assistance in helping them navigate through thorny ethical dilemmas, unquote. One attendee was Kirk Hubbard, then the chief of operations for the CIA Operational Assessment Division. He would later leave the CIA to work for the private firm set up by James Mitchell and Bruce Jessen, the psychologists who were hired as private contractors to set up the CIA interrogation program, including the waterboarding of prisoners. In one 2003 email, Hubbard wrote to a top APA official, quote, "You won't get any feedback from Dr. James Mitchell or Jessen. They're doing special things to special people in special places and generally are not available," unquote. Stephen Reisner and Nathaniel Raymond, welcome back to Democracy Now! Okay, Nathaniel Raymond, why don't you lay out the core findings in your 60-page report?
There are 4 core findings. The first is that the American Psychological Association allowed, as you mentioned, Dr. Susan Brandon, it appears, who 3 weeks before the APA engaged in its ethics process in 2005 on psychological ethics and national security, had been President Bush's behavioral science advisor. She wrote what appears to be research language in the Penn's report, the Psychological Ethics and National Security Policy of the APA. That language, we now know, because of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence report, directly aligns with the legal memos authorizing the enhanced interrogation program and provided an ethical get-out-jail-free card that aligned with the then classified legal get-out-jail-free card. Secondly, we see clear deception by the APA, including some outright lies, including the assertion for many years that James Mitchell, the CIA torture psychologist you mentioned, had not been an APA member. We now know he was an APA member from 2001 to 2006, and the APA has also contended, according to Dr. Stephen Benke, the ethics director, that they had had no contact on interrogations and interrogation techniques with Mitchell and Jessen. We now know that they discussed sensory overload and the use of psychopharmacological agents with Mitchell and Jessen in 2003. The last 2 critical findings, Amy, are that the APA, as we see throughout the emails, expressed no concern about clear evidence of abuse that at that point, between 2004 and 2005, was public knowledge. And lastly, what we see in this report is a clear coordination that directly mirrors the timeline inside the Bush administration when Office of Medical Services personnel inside the CIA were raising concerns about human subjects research as part of the program. The APA, whether they knew it or not, allowed the administration to write a policy that basically helped put down that rebellion inside CIA.
How? By
allowing psychologists to play a critical monitoring and research role that was at the heart of the then newly authorized Bradbury Office of Legal Counsel memo. If psychologists couldn't ethically play this role, if the APA had not engaged in this policy, it is highly likely that the interrogation program itself would have disintegrated.
Now, Dr. Spencer, that's what our emphasis is going to be about here in today's show. Can you please introduce yourself to our listeners, just a brief synopsis of who you are, your background, and how we come to why you're here today?
Well, okay, I'm Edward Spencer, MD. I'm a neurologist. I attended Stanford University undergraduate. I graduated from Yale Medical School and residency in UC San Francisco. I'm retired in about 2010, and I came under attack by the medical board because I questioned vaccinations. And this is very relevant to this. You know, you ask a question, go to jail, is the way the system works. And then, you know, they take you into some supposed well-being committee And then the whole idea is to get you to a preloaded a shrink working for them to give a diagnosis which will take away your career and your license. And this goes on throughout the whole United States. All medical, as I can tell, are organized to destroy anyone who questions the system. So this is very much like what's going on here, I would say, that the American Psychological Association is collaborating with the torturers and to try to redefine torture and to blitz the language so we don't know what we're talking about. And that also is a very common phenomenon that we have to watch all the time, that the language is being distorted and abused. And the good part of this is that there's this group of psychologists who have shined the light on this situation and exposed the American Psychological Association. One question we have to always ask, and I don't know, I can't definitely answer them, is how does this come about? How are the medical boards, the societies, the journals, whatever, corrupted? Who are the individuals that come down and turn something that was working for humanity into something that's working against humanity? Where did they come from? What's their motivation? And on like that. That's very important. There's a concept that I first heard about from the UK, from I think a fellow by the name of Gary, on a radio program over there, of change agents. That these people get into positions of power in an institution and mess it up, wreck it. They go from taking it, making it something that's working for humanity to something that's working against humanity. And I would say the APA is definitely working against humanity. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on all of this.
Mm-hmm. Now, what's interesting about the APA's position here, they're calling this report "All of the President's Psychologists," and in the American Psychological Association's secret complicity with the White House and the U.S. intelligence community it was in support with the CIA's enhanced interrogation program. This is based on hundreds of newly released internal emails, and I guess spanning from years from 2003 to 2006, that showed top officials were in direct communication with the CIA. That's top officials with the APA. And the report also reveals that Susan Brandon, a behavioral science researcher working for President Bush, secretly drafted language that the APA specifically and purposely inserted into its ethics policy on interrogations. And what was also disturbing, as Amy Goodman was disclosing in this article, is the details on how the APA, and basically the APA is the world's largest group of psychologists, aided government-sanctioned torture under President Bush. And the reason this is close to our heart, through the International Center Against Abusive Covert Technologies, we specifically, and Dr. Spencer, I think you can testify to this, is that we hear not only from thousands of victims here in the United States who claim that non-consensual experimentation is still going on today, and this is not just some conspiracy theory. This is not just someone having some delusional thoughts or experiences. We've had President Clinton, who came out and apologized to the United States about these type of embarrassing things that are a very downside to American history. So to say that these individuals, thousands of them claiming the exact same synopsis, the exact same experience, are delusional statistically, is that a high probability?
No. I would say that most of them are telling the truth. And this is, of course, that you can compare this with the other side, who's calling them liars who are not telling the truth. It's